So I'm managing partner of an entity called Red Sand Partners. Essentially, we act as a technology due diligence engine for professional investors in the emerging world of technology. So our focus is predominantly artificial intelligence, crypto technologies, blockchain, and digital identity. We also go on to produce prototypes and market-ready products. So we actually I have an infrastructure of a lab infrastructure in order to do that. But today, I'm going to take a slightly different slant. So I guess on a cloudless, sunny day, we could see across the strait to the vast continent that is Africa. And there's no accident as to why I'm here and why I'm speaking about the African opportunity, because it really is fascinating. I spend a large portion of my time on the continent, and it is both an opportunity as an emerging distribution market, but also a fascinating seat for innovation. So my aim is to take you on a journey as to what Africa is looking like, what the investment landscape is and could be, the changing role of bank and banking infrastructure, and of course then dive into some concrete examples of the blockchain and crypto economy opportunity. So, it's all about timing. I have been working on the continent for a decade, and I have to say, it's been full of friction. But within the last 2 years, things have really changed for Africa. And wherever I go, and I do work globally, eyes are set on the continent, and there's no accident here. First of all, Africa presents a huge distribution opportunity. Over 50% of the world's mobile penetration is on the continent, and over 50% of the population is around about the age of 25. So huge consumer demand opportunity. It is also the home to the fastest growing cities of the world. So Lagos and Kinshasa will top 30 million in population size by 2050. And surprisingly, when you look at internet penetration, Africa, 7 out of the 10 countries worldwide are on the list. So really, really fascinating. It's also an amazing source of innovation. So this extract is from the GSMA, and it's a count just late last year of the presence of technology innovation across the continent. So there are over 300 active technology hubs clustered, I have to say, mostly in the incubation and the accelerator space, but they spread over 90 cities in 42 countries. Now, considering there's only 52 countries on the continent, that's pretty good going. What's also very interesting is we've seen a move away from the big major players and the biases, I have to say, could be construed as such, of the mobile network operators. And moreover, when we're talking about big brands and big capability, it's the big tech players moving in. So Mark Zuckerberg was famously spending time in Kenya last year. Google have a big infrastructure. Silicon Valley is present with 500 startups. And so the list continues. But what's also important is the continent is shifting away from this notion of dependency. There are a number of entities across the continent that are completely self-sufficient. So for those of you involved in the Francophile space, Yoko Yoko Labs, I never quite get the name right, is present in Francophile Africa, completely independent, supported by social venture funding. Kenya's famous iHub, home of Eric Hersman, who's known as the White African, is completely venture funded, and then Nigeria is seeing with CC Lab its first venture accelerator combination structure coming together. Now, I always have a saying, and that is innovation always follows the money trail, not the other way around, and I'm sure Gibraltar is just an absolute story for that. And so is the case for Africa. So this extract is really important because what it tells you is money is moving onto the continent, and it's moving in a sustainable way and the growth across all stages of funding is impressive. So 87% of the funding, that venture funding, technology venture funding that's going into Africa right now is spread across technology infrastructure projects, e-commerce, and social technology, let's put it that way, unsurprisingly, and then, of course, financial inclusion. In fact, 45% of all projects, and I think there were 46 transactions last year, and the year before, were in the financial inclusion space. But FinTech is maturing. So FinTech is seeing incredible growth as a cluster, and it's not just payments and remittances, I have to stress, up by 70% last year. And insurance, after lending, is the next biggest growth segment. Investment rose by 470% year on year. So pretty impressive numbers. But what I like to see is I like to see an ecosystem that has sustainability, which means the investment has to be present and growing in all segments. So we've gone way beyond seed and early stage funding. We're now seeing growth in investment across all major rounds up to Series B, which is really, really healthy. And we're also starting to see some of the big exports and big icons in FinTech and financial technology innovation coming out of Africa. So this is just a quick snapshot of where this activity is. So by far and away, simply because of the maturity of the South African market, there is a bias in terms of the number of companies present in Southern Africa. But when you look at the actual activity of countries in terms of the number of companies, innovators, actually Nigeria ranks number 2. North Africa is really quite marginal, I have to say, in this study, which is an interesting debate and something we can look at a break. But what's really also fascinating to see is that when it comes to segmentation, there's representation across almost every segment within the financial services industry. So the very yellow, obviously, payments and remittances still features very, very heavily. But as you can see, this it's a bit hard to see, I guess, from you, but that navy blue extract is blockchain infrastructure projects. But you're also getting, I hate the term Investec, wealth technology. So actually, really, a complete diverse spectrum of segmentation in terms of innovation. And the numbers are impressive. This slide, I'm not going to go into any of these examples, bar the ones at the bottom. These are the icons, right? So Jumo is now a multi tens of million in valuation. It started its early journey in East Africa on the rails of the Airtel network providing microcredit. It is now a giant, all right, and an amazing success story. BitPesa, I'm sure many of you are familiar with BitPesa. You know, Elizabeth, the CEO, real forerunner, real pioneer, driving Bitcoin remittances even well before the kind of glut and the headiness we've enjoyed over the last 2 years. And then Easy Equities. So Easy Equities is a retail stockbroker platform. They are doing amazing things, including fractional investing for the retail investor. They are so successful that they're importing to Australia the platform and the UK, and are under the heady eyes of BlackRock at the moment. So, you know, what I'm trying to say is there's some amazing, amazing stories to be seen there. Right, the role of the incumbents. Well, okay, they're banks, as we know. But the big issue is access and cost. So on the left-hand side, we have Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Nigeria represented in terms of financial services penetration presence of financial services present in these countries. But actually, what's telling, and that's beg your pardon. On the graph on the left-hand side is the population size in and around financial centers. So big story of urbanization, no surprise there. However, on the right-hand side is really the story of access. So you can see there's a huge discrepancy between financial centers and actually people having access to financial products. And again, this is simply because of cost and friction. So there is a lot going on to address how banks with within the continent can actually get on the innovation agenda. And I'm privy to a program called Above and Beyond, which is sponsored by the Dutch Development Bank, the FMO, which is actually providing literally a technology platform to match innovation globally to African banking needs. So they can integrate solutions, they can test solutions, and they can do this in a way that's highly efficient through the FinForward program. And they've already provided 69 solutions to the 10 African banks listed on the left-hand side. So this is a good sign. This means the incumbents are taking the opportunity seriously. Oops, sorry. But the real case here is really the story of the crypto economy and the blockchain economy. And I don't have to go into too much detail here, but of course we have a continent that is needing to be unlocked, and this is a huge driver for greater transparency in terms of lacking dependable economic government structures. There's also huge opportunity to foster the remittance market through cryptocurrencies. Some of the most expensive corridors in the world are in Africa. I mean, probably the most expensive corridor in the world is between South Africa and Zambia for remittances. So massive opportunity. Hyperinflation, I mean, we've, thank goodness, seen the overturn of the Zimbabwean government quite recently, and I was delighted, sorry, did I say that? Whoops, to enjoy the new entry of the South African president 2 weeks ago. But, you know, inflation is a real challenge in order to foster trade and movement of people across countries. And then, of course, trust. Right. So I will, in full disclosure, give you a heads up that I am an advisor to a company called Walla. Walla is, as you will see, is a Ethereum-based transaction engine. It acts as a gateway to support incumbents with the unbanked or underbanked. It is led by a lady by the name of Trisha Martinez, and this video was taken in Kinshasa just last week and gives you just a taste of the reality of some of the technologies coming out of the continent in the crypto space. Can you play the video for me? It's downloading the video. Oh dear. Sorry. Any good? How am I doing for time? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, while we get the video, I'll just give you a little bit more on. Oh, I can't even move the slides now. Yes, sure.
Just on the emergence of exchanges, how do you see that sort of people about?
Sorry, can people get out?
The emergence of exchanges, how do actually get their hands on?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing is there's still some immaturity regarding the utility of crypto, absolutely. The mindset and the appetite for actually moving from virtual economies of utility to actually using that as a trading or an exchange opportunity, less so. And this is actually one of the challenges that Walla are considering right now, is actually when do they release their own cryptocurrency, which is known as the dollar, onto an exchange. Because there is a natural tension between the 1 million people that have the dollar wallet and actually those people that want to trade the token. Yeah, so I think there's some way to go on that. But it will come, you know, and again, it's all about where those exchanges are placed and how they're governed and how they're regulated.
You mentioned in an online excerpt by you that
My word. Better be good now. God. Just like, I only wanted like 3 minutes of the video.
You mentioned in an online excerpt by you that whatever you're trying to create, the digital currency now is what Bitcoin wanted to be. The reason being is that Bitcoin was not designed for emerging markets. Tell us why.
Exactly. So there's a lot of hype with Bitcoin. When anyone hears about cryptocurrency, they think Bitcoin. They don't know these other altcoins. There's a lot of token sales going on, so new cryptocurrencies are being issued, which is great and exciting. The issue with Bitcoin in emerging markets, though, is that the cost to process transactions is really high and the actual processing time is very long. So imagine you're a consumer in Uganda riding on a boda. You need to pay the driver, a few bucks, and you want to do it in Bitcoin, and it takes 10 minutes to process that transaction, and the fee is actually higher than the ride itself. Right. So with Bitcoin, it becomes really difficult for consumers who are making micropayments to actually utilize this cryptocurrency. There are things like the Lightning Network, which is a scaling solution for Bitcoin, which is going to aim to solve these costs and processing time problems. Right. But it doesn't exist yet, and we don't know how long it will take. And that's why we saw the potential to design a cryptocurrency specifically for these consumers who are operating in these markets that are processing micropayments.
All right, now the task now you have is uptake, because you mentioned earlier that when you first heard of Bitcoin, you pushed it to the side and now waited until everyone got on the bandwagon, or at least earlier, for you to give it some more attention. What makes you think that we'll actually pay the needed attention to dollar?
So there's so much potential in emerging markets, right? In Africa, fastest growing middle classes in the world. There's so much money being made. There's so many underserved consumers. We started our company Walla as a mobile financial platform to provide zero-fee financial services to consumers. We saw that banks weren't adequately serving consumers appropriately, and they had the wrong business models of fees on top of every product or service you're using. But we also recognize that in order to provide zero-fee financial services, you need to operate on the blockchain technology because it removes those fees. And that's why we ended up doing this token sale, issuing a new cryptocurrency. And when it comes to accessing financial services, the two biggest pain points for consumers are costs and access. Digital removes the access problem. Costs are not being removed right now by banks, but Dala can remove those cost problems and make it completely seamless for a consumer to send money to anyone around the world instantly at no cost.
All right, execution, you mentioned that.
Thank you very much. Okay, if you can get me back to the slide, that would be great. So yeah, so a real tangible example of Walla. Walla is going to be, that's a sample of the wallet. The wallet has been in circulation for the last 2 years. It has been already adopted by 1 million under or unbanked people, predominantly in East Africa. The utility model, I was heavily involved in the token sale process, and it was best in class. Modest raise, by the way, very modest raise. I think they raised just under, depending on the price of Ethereum at the point, but it was just under $3 million, which goes a long way in Africa. But right now there is launch planned for South Africa in March, then Uganda and Zim. So look out for that one. So the role of governments, of course, you can't get away from that. And I'm seeing, again, very encouraging signs from various governments in the continent in terms of their openness and their readiness to engage. Obviously, the South African government I work quite closely with, predominantly the Reserve Bank, who acts as the regulating authority around banks. They've got an Ethereum-based committee. I act as a formal innovation advisor to the Mauritian government. Mauritian government is really trying to attract innovation and capital as a gateway onto the continent and support regulatory passporting, and also looking at ICO structures, as you would, in terms of a jurisdiction potential. And then the likes of Kenya and Rwanda have been involved in innovation for a number of years, are very open, very active. So in summary, I'm because I've spent many years on the continent, I'm very buoyant. It's taken a long old haul to get to this point, but it shows huge promise and for all the reasons we've seen, mainly because of the market opportunity and the timeliness and the adoption of technology. It is starting to attract real serious money of all kinds across multiple segments, which is encouraging. There is absolutely no doubt that the role of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain economy will become pervasive, not just within financial services, but in terms of the movement of people, the role of digital identities on the blockchain. For those of you interested, Kenya, there's a Kenyan token called Harambee that is looking at kind of land usage and making sure that land as a token, that land prevention of corruption in terms of land registry activity is in place, and then of course supply chain. Absolutely massive. And then, it's going to be very interesting to see what banks do and whether they're going to be able to leapfrog or not. And by the way, when I say banks, I kind of also lump mobile network operators in that too, because they've been the banks of the continent. And as Mark Zuckerberg says, the future will be built in Africa. Thank you very much.
Nicole, before you go.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
See if we have any questions.
Sure.
We have one.
Hi, Hugo Moore from the money transfer industry. Great presentation. Just want to add something that is very interesting. BitPesa just bought Transfer Zero, a money transfer payment institution in Spain. I think is the first time that we see this crossover, which is really exciting. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. Really good news.
Do we have any other questions for Nicole at all? Yes? Oh, yes. Right.
Thank you, Peter. What is the stance of the governments in countries that have active foreign exchange control, such as Nigeria and Naira? Aren't they afraid that supporting cryptocurrencies may actually defeat the purpose of those monetary policies?
Yeah, I mean, exchange control is a big issue. So Nigeria, South Africa have had that in place for years. I think the stance is protective for now, predominantly to kind of protect mainstay traditional, corporate industry and treasury functions of their kind of major big pocket providers that keep GDP up. However, if you look at the role the central banks are playing, they are acting as a mitigating factor to open up conversations. And as we know, that's where it begins. So there's some way to go. But I think the regulators are also really desperate for guidance, looking at how they can align and party up with or work in clusters. Hence why, we had the conversation yesterday, hence why the Mauritian regulator is actually trying to act as a broker and as a kind of a big brother for a couple of African regulators. So long way to go, but the doors are open. They know it's coming.
Nicole, we have one more question from here.
Yes.
Thank you for that, Nicole. Very interesting. One question. In terms of compliance, which we spoke about before at length, how sophisticated is the African market in that respect?
That's a big question.
Short answer then.
Yeah, short answer. I think, it just depends. I mean, people... Not you specifically, but people tend to think of Africa as one amorphous construct, and yet it's, 52 countries, and you've got some of the most mature financial services markets in the world, like South Africa, and some of the most innovative corridors, such as East Africa, where these two worlds are colliding. I think there's a long way to go, and there's huge opportunity to facilitate that. But I think the biggest challenge that Africa has is they're actually not even thinking about, when it comes to consumers, the kind of compliance pain hasn't even hit them. It's predominantly how do we move the dial on people at the bottom of the pyramid, right? So how do we get people actually transacting through the financial system? And when I speak to authorities, compliance is actually really not well understood when it comes to consumers. The biggest headache they have is really trying to look at what, well, not headache. I think the interest is predominantly on what this could mean for tax revenues. So unbanking the unbanked or underbanked, the first thing that comes up is, okay, so what does this mean from a tax perspective? So it's a big old question. Hopefully I've gone some way to answering it.
Nicole, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, well, hopefully if that's the worst technical problem we have over the next 2 days, I'll live with that. Fraser, thank you for a timely question. Just before we go on to the next presentation, I just wanted to, a bit of news. I heard earlier that Chuck